But moving on away from the spotlight that is Las Vegas and people showing up for a big time presser, TNA Wrestling, right? It got pretty exciting a couple months ago when they went to Las Vegas in the Palms. And well, they were in front of a smaller crowd that was at the WrestleMania presser, but that's a pretty big deal for them. And, they thought, it was quite a worthy a moment. TNA returned to being TNA in the month of January after years of being Impact Wrestling, harkened back to their days of, Sting and Kurt Angle and Scott Steiner and AJ Styles and Samoa Joe and their lineage, right? Never obviously truly being a competitor with WWE, but I would definitely say, and a lot of people may forget about it, but where AEW is today in the pecking order, TNA was there. And people do forget that, TNA was averaging the numbers that AEW essentially is averaging now, right? It's crazy to think because those are kind of like lower numbers, in terms of wrestling. And, it's people obviously don't think that TNA was really ever as popular as AEW is. And I don't think it ever really was. But at the time, it did get some of those numbers. Crazy to think. But TNA returned in January, with a rebirth and a rebrand. And one of the guys that was behind that was a guy who's been there for quite some time, and that's Scott D'Amore. Scott D'Amore has kind of been leading Impact Wrestling and TNA, and he's been, he's been the guy. He's been the Triple H of that company, if you will. Yeah. Not necessarily, obviously, like the owner or anything like that, even though recently we found out that he actually was attempting to purchase Impact/TNA Wrestling just a little bit ago, but he was let go from TNA. And unlike a lot of the controversy that we've been seeing, with the Vince McMahons and everything in the world, this isn't as clear cut as a reason as those things. And a lot of people are kind of speculating and wondering, why essentially when this company is starting to be in a positive way and has a lot of him to thank, why he's let go from this company at this time when he was the one that came out in November, I think, or at Bound for Glory and, essentially was standing in the middle of the ring with the microphone announcing the rebirth of TNA, in the middle of the ring in Las Vegas announcing the rebirth of TNA for Hard to Kill. And here he is now out of a job. Do you have any answers or any speculation as to why this could be? And, is TNA dropping the ball here?
TNA is dropping the ball. Like, here's the thing. It's ridiculous because all the different reports that have been out there at this point, there's a lot of speculation that they let the wrestlers know via Skype, like they just kind of like dropped the ball. And like, I guess there's other reports that are, I can't confirm or anything, but there's, on the rumor mill, they were telling wrestlers that he was stepping down, which is not the truth at all. That's what my understanding is. He did not step down. He was legitimately fired, but they were trying to spin it, which Anthem Sports, excuse me, they have a lot of explaining to do because I'm looking here. I'm just looking through social media, and Moose, for example. You know me, I'm a big Moose guy. He's got a lot of Syracuse ties. Football player and everything. He wouldn't have signed back with TNA if it wasn't for Scott. So, and then, I'm looking here, like Jordan Grace, who we just saw at Royal Rumble, who she's got a little fire. Like, I'm going through this list. I'm looking at all these big names in TNA. And it's like, they're all pretty ticked off about the whole situation. And the crazy thing is, he just gave a great speech recently here with, I believe it was Will Ospreay in the ring. Like, there was a hell of a match. Excuse me.
I think Scott D'Amore was in the back at Royal Rumble, obviously, when Jordynne Grace was, getting ready for her appearance in the Royal Rumble. And, obviously Naomi was making her return to WWE. So, he was probably pretty instrumental, too, in that, talent exchange, if you will, obviously with Jordynne Grace and the return of Naomi and stuff like that.
There was. I think they were building a good relationship between TNA and WWE. And, to me, I don't know what Anthem's doing, but to me, I think in my initial reaction when I heard the news, I feel like it's kind of short-sighted because they were trending in the right direction. Like, they were gaining traction. Like, were they ever going to be the juggernaut WWE? No, we weren't expecting that. Like, that's an obvious thing. But they were gaining traction. People were talking about them. And he did a great thing by having his talent and that belt that Jordynne Grace was wearing featured on one of the biggest wrestling shows of the year. So Scott D'Amore did a hell of a job with that. And then you just kick him to the curb. To me, it's ridiculous. I think Anthem Sports has a lot they have a lot of explaining to do because it's ridiculous.
Well, maybe something is going to explain some of this. As of right now, just like the WrestleMania press conference, I got no answers. It doesn't really make any sense on what we know now. But if something comes out that makes more sense about this, we'll definitely talk about it. It's very interesting to see. And as you were mentioning, hey, if there is really nothing, nothing nefarious, no good reason, essentially, to relieve, Scott D'Amore of the job, then, hey, maybe he shows up in AEW and gives them a hand. Maybe he oversees Ring of Honor or something like that. You said that'd be great, but here's my issue when it comes to that. I like it. Tony Khan clearly likes to do what Tony Khan likes to do. I don't see Tony Khan relegating Tony Khan task because he could be doing that already. There's probably lots of people who probably tell him all the time, don't do this, stop it, let me take care of this. He ain't listening, right?
Tony Khan is his own worst enemy. Tony Khan is his own worst enemy.
So he might bring in Scott D'Amore, but when it comes to making announcements on TV or anything like that, or heading creative, I don't feel like he's just going to take a step back.
I'm just going to say this, and you just said the key phrase there, step back. Tony Khan, you're a billionaire. You're a wrestling fan. That's great. We love it. We thank you for bringing, another brand of wrestling to the masses. We thank you because you're giving all these wrestlers that maybe otherwise wouldn't have jobs in the business anymore. But give the people like Scott D'Amore, other wrestling minds, people that have been in the business, let them handle it because the way he books things, the way he announces things, like this whole thing, we all know. Oh my God, like the way he was wording the whole Boston, Massachusetts thing. Okay, we know the boss is coming. Like, you couldn't build it up any better. Like, he drops the ball on these things all the time. Like, he needs to, he needs to step back and let somebody else actually run the show.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more, with that. And Sasha Banks clearly is coming to AEW. I mean, it's just... they should have just had her show up on TV last night. I mean, I don't really get this whole, hey, book Boston, you know what I mean? But have her come out first and then say, like, I'm making my debut in Boston. Like, there's really no reason to do this whole, like, CM Punk thing again with her, where we obviously are clearly aware that she's going to be there. I think the CM Punk thing even left more to the imagination. I mean, than this does.
Tony just needs to step back. I'll just reiterate it. He needs to step back. Let people that actually know how to run things like do it. Like, honestly, I'll just say this because you know how I am about this particular person, and I know they have a lot of heat because of the things that this particular person says about him on his own podcast. Why not have a guy like Eric Bischoff back at like bring him to AEW? Like, Eric Bischoff did a lot of things, and he's literally the name of his podcast is 83 Weeks for a reason. He went head-to-head against Vince McMahon in WWE for 83 weeks and was winning the ratings war. Nobody else has ever done that. So, like, why wouldn't you bring in maybe even – he doesn't have to maybe be, like, I don't know, like an EVP or whatever random title they're going to make up. He could come in and be a consultant. Like, I know there's some issues there because –
well, there was issues between Vince and Eric. As Jerry Lawler said, he was beside Vince when he heard him wish death upon Eric Bischoff on a weekly basis, and they got along – and,
I know. Anything can happen in wrestling, but I know there's. It sounds like there's been cheap shots between Tony and Eric Bischoff, whether it's podcasts, social media. I think a guy like Eric Bischoff, or like we just mentioned, a Scott D'Amore, those are the type of people you want. The thing with Tony, I think Tony should just be a silent owner, and like you see some of the best owners in sports. You don't know who they are because they let people know. They let people that know what they're doing and know the business just do the business. You like one of the Super Bowl teams. You got the Chiefs, you got the Niners. Nobody talks about Mr. Hunt, the owner of the Chiefs. He barely he stays out of it. He lets his football people do the football things. Tony Khan's got a ton of money. Let the wrestling people, let somebody that's been in the business a long time, let them run the show. And then keep cutting checks because we appreciate what you're doing. You're a billionaire. You're keeping people employed. People are wrestling. But at the end of the day, you got to let people they know the business in and out. Let them run it. Not some guy that is a fan that has a lot of money. That's just me.